Okay, good morning. We are going to go back just a little bit. We are going to go back to Kuf Lamed Beis, 13 lines from the bottom. Itmar. We stopped in the middle of a piece, so we're just going to go back to the beginning of that piece. We are learning the Nishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kamen Ruven Her Neshama Shaved Aliyah. Let's jump in. Itmar Amrav Zera. This is going to be the last piece we talk about a Mavoi for a little while. Okay, so Amrav Zera Amarav. Let's just quickly review actually. A Chatzer, right? What do you have? You have houses. Each house opens up into a courtyard. The courtyard then now. Each courtyard normally opens up into an alleyway, and then the alleyway opens up into Rosh Hashanah. So in an ideal fashion, all the houses, they join together with what we call a Ruve Chatzeros. They all became one entity by joining together, and then the Mavoi, all the different Chatzeros that open up into this alleyway, the Mavoi, they all join together as well as partners, and then you also put a post at the end of the Mavoi, either this way or this way, in order to remind people not to carry from there into Rosh Hashanah. So says Rav Zera Amarav, Itmar Amarav Zera Amarav, Mavoi Shalon Ishtatfu Bo, a Mavoi which the courtyards were not merged together, you're only allowed to carry 4 amos. Amar Abaye says, Hamilsa Amar Rav Zera V'lo Pirsha. Rav Zera taught us this, but he never explained it. And also Rabbi Baravua, Pirsha told Rabbi Baravua came along and explained it, and as we'll see, we still need to clarify because it wasn't so clear. From Rabbi Baravua comes along and says something which seems very counterintuitive. What does he say? An alley in which the courtyards were not merged with a shituf. Okay, so the courtyards, you have individual courtyards with houses opening up into them, and they all these bunch of courtyards, they all open up into an alleyway, and they did not merge. If the courtyards merged with the houses of the courtyard, okay, so if the courtyards themselves, they all merged with their own individual houses, and they did not join together, all the different chatzeros together, then you're only allowed to carry in the alleyway up to 4 amos. So if you had a baseball sitting in the alleyway, you're only allowed to push it 8 feet back and forth. You're allowed to throw it 8 feet back and forth, 4 amos, but not more than that. Low ervo chatzeros and batim, if the courtyards did not merge with the houses, so with the individual courtyards, you didn't do any joining whatsoever, then you're allowed to carry in the alley's entirety. You're allowed to have a full catch in the alley. Okay, again, it seems very counterintuitive. And therefore, Rav Chanina Chaza asks, why is it when the courtyards merge the houses? Okay, why is it when the courtyards merge the houses, is there a problem? Because as a result of the joining together of each chatzar with the houses that exist there, okay, then it's no longer seen as a courtyard, rather it's just seen as extension of the houses. And Rav holds that an alley is, you're not allowed to carry an alley. Actually, now we're on the top of the next page. You need both houses and courtyards. Here, since they made a ruve chatzeros, since each chatzer joined all the houses together, you don't see a chatzer. The chatzer is not seen as an entity. It's just seen as just an extension of the houses, and therefore the mavoi, the joining together of the mavoi is not going. The mavoi is not going to be. You're not able to make a proper mavoi over here that's joined together, because at the end of the day, you don't have chatzeros. You don't have courtyards and houses. All you have is houses, and therefore, even though if you put a side post, a kora or a lechi at the end of the mavoi, it's not enough to carry it because you don't have something which we'll define as a chatzar. In other words, let's just explain. If they went ahead, each chatzar, and they joined all the houses together, and then all the chatzeros joined together, then you have something called a houses, because each house is individual houses, but then the chatzeros, they all join together, and therefore you have both houses and courtyards. So asks Rav Chanina Choza, ki lo ervunami, if the courtyards did not merge together, so when the houses did not merge together, which again, we just said a second ago, if the houses did not merge together, then counterintuitively, you're allowed to carry within the whole mavoi. So what's going on? Why are you allowed to carry? So if the courtyards did not merge together, then each house is not there. You don't see it there because you can't carry anything outside the house. So therefore, we see the house as if they're not there. And therefore, there are courtyards opening up into the mavoi, but there are no houses opening up into the mavoi, since these houses, halachically, you can't carry from them. Okay? So granted, there are houses there, but halachically, we don't see those houses since they have no relationship with the mavoi, since they didn't join together with the chatzar. So the Gemara says, no. The reason you're allowed to carry within the whole mavoi, when the chatzar each chatzir did not make a ruve chatzeros is because all of them could say, you could do this on Shabbos and say, I relinquish my ownership and give it all to this one owner in that chatzir, and therefore you have a house, meaning you have a house because each person's giving their house over, and you have the chatzeros because there's these individual chatzeros, and therefore you have houses and you have courtyards, and therefore Rav holds in such a case you're able to make the mavui is going to be effective. So the Gemara says, sof bais ika batim leika. There's not houses if they all go ahead and relinquish their ownership to one person. So granted, and here's the key, granted you're now allowed to carry within that chatzar, right? So in other words, let's just go back in case this wasn't clear. If I have a chatzar where the houses, they forgot, they did not get around to doing a ruve chatzeros, but on Shabbos, like, oh my gosh, I really want to carry. So what do? They all relinquish their ownership and give it over to one person. Now, since there's only one house and a courtyard, you're allowed to carry now. But the Gemara says, again, what did Rav say? Rav said you need houses and you need courtyards. Over here, you only have one house, since each person is relinquishing their ownership to one person. So sof bais ika batam leika. There's only one house. Granted, there's physical houses, but halachically, there's only one house, and there isn't houses. Rav said you need to have houses. So the Gemara says, what we could do, let's say you and I, three of us live in a courtyard, what we could do is we could say, okay, from the first half of the day, we're going to relinquish ownership to me. Second half of the day, we're going to relinquish ownership to you, right? And that means that there are houses. The Gemara says, at the end of the day, at the moment that there is one house, there are no other houses. And the moment that there's the second house, your house, if we all relinquish ownership to your house, there aren't other houses. So this is the real explanation behind this counterintuitive halacha. Again, we're talking about a courtyard, an alleyway which has a cross beam or a lechi at the end of it, okay? And the chatzir and each individual courtyard, they did not join together. In that case, Rav says you're allowed to carry within the entire mavoi. But if we did join together and we're allowed to carry in the chatzar, then we are no longer allowed to carry significantly within the courtyard, within the alleyway. We're only allowed to carry 4 amos. What's going on? El Ravashi, migaram lachatzir she'asur. What's the reason that Chazal came along and said you can't carry from the courtyards into the mavoi, batim, the houses? The houses, what does it mean, the houses? Meaning, halachically, when you have a ruve chatzeros, you're allowed to carry from the house into the courtyard. So that's the reason, because you're going to go ahead and carry something from the house into the courtyard, and then you're going to take it from the house, courtyard, and then into the alleyway. That's why they said you can't carry in the mavoi. But in a case where they did not make a ruve chatzeros, meaning you're therefore not allowed to carry from a house into the courtyard, then and Rav holds you are allowed to carry from a chatzir into a mavoi. There's no issue there. That's why he holds that when we did not do a ruve chatzeros, it's actually better, because then there's no chance that a person's going to go ahead and take something from their house and bring it into the mavoi. All they're going to do is take something from the chatzir and bring it into from the courtyard and bring it into the alleyway, and that's totally fine. And therefore, v'leika, in a case where there's no ruve chatzeros, there are no houses, meaning what it means is that you're not able to carry from the houses into the courtyard. Therefore, there's no concern of a person going from the house into the courtyard, into the alleyway. And therefore, Rav says in such a case, you're allowed to carry fully through the mavoi. But in a case where there was a ruve chatzeros done, and the chatzeros did not join together with the mavoi and the other chatzeros, and therefore make the mavoi a permissible place, then you're not allowed to do so, because you're going to end up carrying from the house into the chatzar, which is permitted, and then you're going to carry it into the mavoi, which can't be done. And therefore, that's why in the case where there is no ruve chatzeros, is actually going to be better. Okay. Remember, we had a Eliezer Shita, his opinion, which said that you are allowed to do the machshirei mitzvah, the preparation of the mitzvah. Now we're going to get into a whole discussion. Remember, by the bris milah, he said you're allowed to cut down the trees in order to make the ashes and the coals in order to make the knife, right? So whereas Rabbi Kiva said no, and the Rabbanan said no, it's limited. Okay, so Amar Yochanan, it's not by all mitzvahs did he say this, only by some mitzvahs. Because, for example, the 2 loaves that are brought on Shavuos. Okay, there's a special offering brought of 2 loaves on Shavuos. Okay, v'lo lamdan or Eliezer el mizir shavan. Rabbi Eliezer did not say, oh, you could go ahead and bake the bread and cut the wheat down and all that. The only reason he said, he did say you're allowed to do it, but he didn't say based on bris milah. We'll just say it's a general principle, but he had to learn it from a very specific limud, from a very specific teaching. So what the Gemara over here is trying to convey to us is that don't think Rabbi Eliezer's rule about doing all the preparations is across the board. It's going to be in particular mitzvahs. We're going to go through a bunch of mitzvahs where he does say you're allowed to do so, but each one's going to have its own particular limit, its own particular source. It's not a general across the board. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Where do you know that all the preparation for the two loaves override Shabbos? That you're allowed to do things on Shabbos to prepare for these two loaves that are brought on Shavuos. Nemra Hava Omer, since it says the word bringing by the Omer offering. The Omer offering is brought on the second day of Pesach. Nemra Hava B'shtei Lechem, and it says bringing by the two loaves. Mahava Muraba Omer Machshir Dochim Shabbos. Just like when it says by the Omer, you're allowed to do the preparations, and that overrides the regular melachos of Shabbos. Af Hava Muraba B'shtei Lechem. So to the bringing regarding the two loaves, Machshir Dochim Shabbos, the preliminary actions override Shabbos. Okay, so we have a specific limud, a specific teaching, because it's not a general rule, as says the Gemara, mufne. And whenever you have Gzeir Shava, means Gzeir Shava is when you have Shava, means equal, and you have two words that are identical, and you learn one from the other. There is a discussion about that the words have to be available. There have to be extra words, and that's why you can learn this word from that word. But if they're not both available, they're used for other things, then, and especially if there's questions that could be asked, then you won't be able to learn one from the other. So the Gemara says mufne. It must be literally free. It has to be a free word. Dilo mufna, because if it wasn't a free word, and you're just learning because of the common word, but it's not a free word, it's not an extra word, then you could ask. You could ask a question. When it comes to Omer, if a person found barley cut already, then he has an obligation. There's an obligation we're not going to get into right now, but there's an obligation to cut specifically for the Omer. Okay, so whereas with the two loaves, there isn't the same level of obligation of cutting down fresh, new items, and therefore you wouldn't be able to learn one from the other. So Gemara says, yes, you're right, it is completely open. Since it's written, so you see the word and then you have another word, so it teaches you it's extra. Clearly it is extra, it's free for interpretation. Okay, but there is a discussion about, do you need both words to be extra, or is it enough to be one word? So the Gemara says, granted, it's free on one side. Rabbi Eliezer has taught us, there's machlokas elsewhere, that when it comes to Gzeir Shava, okay, so there's like three levels. It has to be open to counter any questions, and then in addition, it has to be open on both sides, because if it's not open on both sides, if the words in both places are not extra, then you're able to ask questions. Gemara says, yeah, taviu ribuyahu. There's an extra word you shall bring by the two loaves, and therefore it's extra over there. So the extra word by the shtei halechem, the extra word by Omer, and therefore you can learn one from another, and you won't ask any questions. So Gemara says, when Rav Yochanan said that Rabbi Eliezer's halacha is limited to certain mitzvos, it's not by all mitzvos. What was he coming to exclude? If you want to say that he was coming to exclude the preliminary things needed to do the mitzvah of lulav, can't be. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, the Rabbi Eliezer says that all the preparations needed for lulav do override Shabbos. So we see that Rabbi Eliezer holds that you are allowed to do preparation, pieces, all preparatory actions for getting ready for lulav. So maybe you're going to say it's coming to exclude the preliminary steps for making a sukkah. That Tanya sukkah v'chamach shiradochs and Shabbos. Rabbi Eliezer holds that when it comes to sukkah, all the preliminaries override Shabbos. To Rabbi Eliezer, matzah. So maybe it's talking about matzah. That time we're going to buy some matzah v'chamach shiradochs and Shabbos. If you're going to prepare matzah and it's Shabbos, you're allowed to do all the preparatory steps in order to make matzah. So Rabbi Eliezer limited shofar. So maybe it's coming to exclude shofar. Vatanya shofar v'chamach shiradochs Shabbos. Same thing with shofar. All the preparation things. Let's say it was still attached to the animal's head, you're allowed to cut it down according to Rabbi Eliezer. That's not a problem. To Rabbi Eliezer, Amarav Ada bar Ahav l'meutei tzitzis letaliso mezuzah lepischa. We're coming to exclude tzitzis on one's garment and mezuzah on one's doorway. Okay, those, if you want to do those on Shabbos, you can't do all the preparation steps on Shabbos. Okay, Tanya Namihachi, we learned in a brisa that supports this. V'shavin shemtzietz taliso mezuzah lepischa shu chayav. That everyone agrees if you went ahead and you tied tzitzis on Shabbos, or you attached a mezuzah on your doorway, or you wrote a mezuzah and attached to your doorway on Shabbos, you are going to be chayav v'chatas, because this does not override Shabbos. My time, the Gemara asks, what is the reason that those the preliminaries by mezuzah and tzitzis do not override Shabbos? There is no set time for them. There's no set time to do them. Because they don't have a set time. Every moment you're obligated, right? Granted, there's no set time to put on mezuzah, but it's not like Rosh Hashanah that has a set day. But at the end of the day, if you're living in a house, you own the house, you have to put on a mezuzah right away. By the way, big misconception. People think that when it comes to mezuzah, you have 30 days to put it up. That's only by a rental. When you own the house, the first day you sleep in that house, you must have the mezuzah up, right? So every moment you're missing out. If you're wearing a four-cornered piece of clothing, if a man is wearing a four-cornered piece of clothing, and you're not wearing tzitzis, every moment you're being over. It's an avera, it's a sin. Okay, Amar Nachman Yitzchak v'Tamar Huna Brei Rav Yeshua Hol v'Yad Laf Giran. The reason you're allowed to go ahead and the preliminaries do not override Shabbos is because by those, if I go ahead, I'm wearing a four-cornered piece of clothing and I say it's my hefker, not mine anymore, then I don't have an obligation to put on tzitzis. If I go ahead and say my house is hefker, then I don't have an obligation to put a mezuzah on it because it's not my house. Whereas with lulav, with sukkah, with shofar, all those things, I don't have that ability. I have to blow the shofar. I have to do it right now. There's no loophole. There's no way around it. And therefore, it's only by tzitzis and mezuzah that I don't have. Only about tzitzis mezuzah, that the preliminaries do not override Shabbos. And if I would do the preliminaries to get ready for this mitzvah, then I would be doing a malach. I'd be doing something which is prohibited on Shabbos. I'd be chayav v'chatas. Okay, Amar. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper into those different sources, and what we're going to try to understand is why do we need a pasuk by each one? Why don't we learn one from the other? Okay, so Amar. How do we know that when Rabbi Eliezer taught that all the preparation for a lulav, they override Shabbos? What's the source? If you want to tell me his source is the Omer and the two loaves offerings, you can't learn from there because those are needed as a korban, literally a need of the one above. Excuse me. So you can't learn from that. Ela Amar Kra Bayom, because by lulav it says Bayom. Bayom. Afilu b'Shabbos, to teach you that it has to be done on that day. The lulav has to be done on that day, and therefore, if you didn't prepare whatever you need to prepare on before Shabbos, you must prepare on Shabbos. If it's coming to tell you that you're allowed to move it, you're allowed to shake it on the first day. If it's on Shabbos, it's tiltal. Are you allowed? Do you need a pasuk to tell you allowed to move something? Right? Muktzah is not to right, so it's derabanan. A pasuk cannot come along and tell you, oh, you're allowed to move it on Shabbos. You don't need a pasuk for that. The Torah itself doesn't prohibit moving something. Rather, it's teaching me that when the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos, you're allowed to do all the preparation. It's just in case you're wondering. Back in the day, historically, in the Beis Hamikdash, whatever, a whole discussion, but back in the day, they would shake the lulav on Shabbos. Okay, nowadays we don't do so. Fine. But the bottom line is really, I was just talking about a case where Sukkot, the first day of Sukkot falls on Shabbos. You are allowed to do all the preliminary actions on Shabbos, and we learn from Bayom. We don't learn it from the Omer and the Shtei Lechem. V'Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? What do they do with the words on the day? Bayom will teach you that the mitzvah of lulav applies only during the day. You cannot fulfill the mitzvah of lulav at night. Where does Rabbi Eliezer learn this halacha? There's another passage that says you should rejoice before Hashem for 7 days and not nights. Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan? They need those words are used for something else. I may have thought that I learned the 7 days of lulav. I should say that it's the same as the 7 days of. I should say that whatever the halachos are by sukkah, where it says 7 days, the same halacha should apply by lulav. Malalam yamim vafilu leilos. By sukkah, of course, it's day and night. Afkan yam vafilu leilos. And here too, it should be days and nights. Kamash balan. Teachers know lulav is specifically during the day. Sukkah is night and day. Fine. It says the Gemara of Licht Brachman lulav v'nesu hanach v'neilfu minei. Why don't we just have a source by lulav and we can learn? The two breads, we can learn the Omer. Why don't we just have it by lulav and learn everything else from there? So it says because lulav in some ways is better, in one way is unique because it has 4 different components that are all related to one another that you need to do. You can't just take the lulav on its own. You need to take the lulav and the rava and the hadassim and the esrog together, and therefore in that respect it's special. Whereas Omer, Shtei Lechem, they don't have that same unique element, and therefore you can't learn one from another. Sukkah Shabbos. The Brisa said that Sukkah and all its preliminaries override Shabbos. To Rabbi Eliezer, where's Rabbi Eliezer's source for this? If you want to say it's from the Omer and 2 loaves, that can't be. Since those again are needed for Hashem, those are brought as offerings, and therefore they're more elevated, and therefore maybe that overrides Shabbos. Whereas Sukkah will not. Even lulav, if you want to say you learn from lulav, you can't do so. Because the mitzvah requires the 4 species, and therefore that is also makes it unique. So the fact we have Exer Shava, it says 7 days, and there's 7 days by, it says by Sukkot, 7 days by Lulav. Just like by Lulav, we already learned that override Shabbos, or by Yom, Afkan, Nami Machshir of Dochnas Shabbos, the fact that they have these terms, the same term, it teaches you that Sukkah also override, the preliminaries also override Shabbos. Okay, so the Gemara says, why don't you just learn it by Sukkah? And then we learn everything else from Sukkah. So the Gemara says, Sukkah also has something unique that it's done at night, whereas all those other mitzvahs, Omer, the 2 loaves, Lulav, they're all done during the day, and therefore you can't learn from Sukkah. Okay, let's go the last 2 more. Matzah b'chol machshirei hadochnas Shabbos. We said matzah, also all the preliminaries override Shabbos. Divrei Eliezer, where does Eliezer learn this from? If you want to say it's from the Omer and 2 loaves, it can't be, because those are a necessity of up high. They're a necessity of God. They're a korban, a form of an offering. If you want to learn from Lulav, you can't do such arba minim, because it has the 4 species. It has a unique thing. They have 4 mitzvahs together. If it's from Sukkah, the mitzvah applies both nights and days, and matzah is only the first night, or in Chutz La'aretz, in both nights. We rather we have this Gzer Shava. It says Chamisha Asar by Sukkot. It says Chamisha Asar by Matzah. Malalan Machshir Hadochnas Shabbos. Just like by Sukkah, the preparations override Shabbos. Afkan Machshir Hadochnas Shabbos. Here too, by Matzah, the preliminaries override Shabbos. Lichtu Rachman Matzah. Okay, then we're asking the obvious question. Why don't you just write about Matzah? We should learn everything from it. So it says no. Matzah is unique in the sense that it's an obligation both for men and women, whereas all the other mitzvahs are only limited. The mitzvah is only obligatory for men. Okay. One last one. Shofar v'chol machshira v'dochnas Shabbos. Shofar and all its preliminaries override Shabbos. To Eliezer, where does Eliezer learn this from? Can't learn it from Omer and 2 loaves, because those are a form of an offering, and therefore maybe it's unique. We can't learn from Lulav because it's unique in the sense that it has unique attribute of having the 4 species. You can't learn it from Sukkah, because it has both. The mitzvah is both day and night, and shofar is only on day. And matzah is different because it's applicable to both women and men. It says it shall be a day of shofar sounding for you. By Yom Shabbos, on that day you have to do it, even if it falls on a Shabbos. You have to do everything. Ulamai. And what is the why does it have to say you should do it on that day? What's it coming to teach you should do it on the day? If it's coming to tell you that you're allowed to blow the shofar, not that you can prepare, but you should blow the shofar for Hatan V'Shmuel. We already learned from Shmuel's Academy, that you can't do any malacha. You can't do malacha, and Shmuel taught that there's actually no biblical prohibition against blowing the shofar, because it's not considered a malacha, both kiyas shofar as well as the removal of bread from an oven. We said it was like a skilled action. So these are skills, not considered creative work. The bottom line is our source of all the malachos is by the Mishkan, and they didn't blow shofars in the Mishkan as a form of building the Mishkan, etc. And therefore, that's not considered malacha. Okay, al machshir, and really the word by Yom is coming to teach you that you're allowed to do the preliminaries for shofar on Shabbos. Rabbanan, what do the Rabbanan do with that word? To teach you that mitzvah of shofar applies during the day and not at night. Where does Eliezer learn this halacha? Because we learned this already from a different shofar blowing that's done by Yovel, that on Yom Kippur they blew on the 50th year of the 7-year cycles. They blow a shofar, and there it says on the day of atonement, Yom Kippur, and they can learn one from another. And the Gemara asks finally again, why don't we just say it by shofar and we learn all the other mitzvahs from it? The Gemara says, you can't learn it from the shofar blowing of Rosh Hashanah. There's something incredibly unique about a shofar, that it brings a positive remembrance of the Jewish people to Hashem for good judgment. So that has incredible power. The kiyas shofar, you can't learn other things from it. You can't learn it from the shofar blowing of Yom Kippur, meaning on Yovel. Because it has this impact that all these slaves go free and everything, all the houses go back to the original owners. It has an incredible impact which the other mitzvahs don't have. Okay, fine. And therefore you can't learn from there. Adkan. Okay, now we get back to Mila, which is where we all started. Mila v'chol machshirei hadochnas Shabbos, to Eliezer. So Mila and all its preparations, preliminaries override Shabbos, and there's the opinion of Eliezer. Where does Eliezer learn from? Imikulu gamar. You can't learn it from the other ones, because each of them have their own unique attribute. Therefore, you can't learn it from others. The Ode, and another question you would be able to ask if you want to learn from the others. Malanach, shekin avar zmana batla. The other ones, if the time was past, then it's void. Whereas by bris milah, let's say miss Shabbos, let's say the bris milah falls on Shabbos or falls on any day, you're allowed to do it the next day and the next day and the next day. The other mitzvahs are all time bound. There's the source. Okay, so on the 8th day you should circumcise your flesh, even on Shabbos. Why doesn't the Torah write it by Mila? We'll learn the other ones from it. Because you could ask, so there's something unique about Bris Milah, that there are 13 covenants made about Bris Milah, and therefore you can't learn anything from it. Have a wonderful day.